The UN is sending racism investigators to America at the invitation of the Biden regime. They will be coming to a town near you very soon. This is all part of a much broader deep state agenda. Stay tuned and I'll tell you more. Hey everybody, Alex Newman here with Behind the Deep State. Thank you so much for tuning in. You may have heard that the Biden regime, and yes, I called it the Biden regime on purpose, because Obama is really a major player in this, and Biden doesn't really even seem to know what he's doing anymore. However, they have now invited the United Nations to send racism investigators to America. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said in a statement that as the president has repeatedly made clear, great nations such as ours do not hide from our shortcomings. They acknowledge them openly and strive to improve, with transparency. In this context, the United States intends to issue a formal standing invitation to all UN experts who report and advise on thematic human rights issues. As a first step, we have reached out to offer an official visit by the UN Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism and the UN Special Rapporteur on minority issues. Okay, that all sounds insane because it is. And so Republican congressmen, policy analysts, editorials, and normal Americans balked at this idiocy. However, there were some people who were really happy. The mass murdering dictatorship in communist China, for example, was laughing all the way to the bank. And their totalitarian allies right here in America thought this was wonderful. So before we get to the broader agenda here, the deep state has a crazy plan. They want to turn the UN into a global government, and that, of course, requires demonizing, undermining the United States. And they want to supplant our founding fathers' vision of God-given rights, right? The idea that came from the Bible, that God gave us rights, and we protect these rights by creating government, and that, in fact, government exists to protect these unalienable rights that God gave us, life, liberty. So where do you get these ideas? Property, right? Well, you get them straight out of the Bible. God said, "Thou shalt not murder." The purpose of government is to punish murder and other forms of evil. Therefore, if someone violates your right to life, the government should step in. If somebody violates your right to property, "Thou shalt not steal," then, of course, the government must step in and protect your right to property and punish the evildoers who violated your right to property. So these ideas, of course, are enshrined in our founding documents by our founding fathers. And they protect the right to free speech and freedom of religion and the right to keep and bear arms and all these things. Well, the deep state, using the tool of the United Nations and the mass murdering dictatorship in communist China, want to undermine that. They want to transform that so that your rights become privileges granted by governments and international agreements that, of course, are revocable whenever your dictator or the dictator-controlled United Nations wants that to happen. So there has been a lot of criticism. A coalition of 25 Republicans in Congress under the banner of the Republican Study Committee blasted these people. This was under the leadership of Jim Banks of Indiana, congressman. And he started off by laughing at the idea that we're going to bring in this fringe, racist, critical race theorist. Her name is Tendayi Ahiumi from the United Nations to come investigate America's alleged racism. I want to start off by giving you a little background on this lady, Ahiumi. Her formal title is UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance. Yes, true story. That is actually her title. She came to America from Zambia, and I guarantee you she didn't come here because of the systemic racism. In fact, if I was a betting man, and I'm not, I would bet good money that she came here in pursuit of opportunity, of freedom, of money. Now, if America was really this horrible, evil, systemically oppressive, racist nation, why would an African voluntarily pick up and move from Africa and come to America? In fact, more Africans have voluntarily moved to America now by far than were ever brought here as slaves hundreds of years ago. Why would that be? Do you think she was looking for to be oppressed by the systemically racist America? I guarantee you that's not what she came here pursuing. Another fun fact, since America is so evil and systemically racist, she got herself a nice prestigious job funded by you, dear taxpayer, at the UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. She's a law professor there and focuses on, and I'm quoting here from her resume, her biography, the global governance of racism and xenophobia. Or said, translated into common English, she is a professional race hustler who makes her living stirring up allegations of racism by leeching off of the allegedly racist taxpayers of the United States. And I mean, if America is really so racist, why doesn't she just go back to Zambia? Right? Will they not have her back? I don't know. Another one of her interests, according to her bio, is flooding what's left of the Western Christian world with massive immigration. She calls it migration as decolonization. And so she says Africans and Latin Americans and Asians should all rush into what was formerly known as Christendom, the Western world, Europe, United States, North America, etc., to decolonize whatever that's supposed to mean. Also, fun fact from her background, she has worked in South Africa's notoriously corrupt judicial system, which is, of course, dominated by the African National Congress. And the African National Congress, of course, has been for decades now an outgrowth of the South African Communist Party, which was, of course, an outgrowth of the Soviet Communist Party. True story, guys, and you can read all this on her bio. Now, Republican lawmakers, they said, in our view, this lady's involvement, Akiumi, I don't know how to pronounce it, but her involvement is likely to sow division and distorted accounts of American history. Huh, you think? Okay, they said, with her anti-constitutional and anti-American views already so well established, it is impossible for Miss Akiumi to be objective in her analysis. Your invitation of Miss Akiumi suggests that you are more concerned about American self-flagellation than you are about those men and women facing oppression overseas. Okay, ironically, this Akiumi, during the Trump administration back in 2018, she released a report from the UN calling for a ban on people who believe the things that these congressmen and most Americans believe. She said basically we need to ban these things. She said ascendant nationalist populist ideologies and strategies pose a sobering threat to racial equality by fueling discrimination, intolerance, and the creation of institutions and structures that will have enduring legacies of racial exclusion. She actually went on to argue that the movements led by people like former President Donald Trump, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and many other national leaders are racist and therefore illegal. It's pretty interesting coming from a UN human rights machine that is literally dominated by mass murderers, dictators, gangsters, and kleptocrats, right? All the regimes ruling Cuba, China, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, they all get to sit on the Human Rights Council, which is one of the many reasons why Donald Trump got us out of this farce. Okay, these are the people coming to investigate America. Okay, Cuba, Venezuela, China, Saudi Arabia. They're going to come tell America how horrible our human rights record is. Even the rhinos in Congress are speaking out. Senator Marco Rubio, who represents my great state of Florida, or at least pretends to represent, he tweeted out at Secretary Blinken, he said, instead of asking the UN to come here and tell us how racist America is, why don't you ask them to go to Cuba, where an evil socialist regime storms into people's homes, beats the crap out of them, and then drags them away? And that's a good question. Naturally, Blinken did not respond. Instead, he had his minions busy tweeting out about how the Cubans were actually protesting against COVID. Yep, they're shouting libertad, libertad, which of course means freedom, but really what they mean is we don't like COVID, not, freedom. I mean, come on. This is how crazy the deep state control of our federal government has become, guys. The New York Compost, owned by Rupert Murdoch's globalist media empire, they have the job of pretending to be conservative. They laughed at Biden's plan to let loose UN investigators in America. They called it an utter travesty. They pointed out correctly the UN human rights bureaucracy is all about politics, not truth. They said most of the UN's functionaries are leftist hacks. The higher ranks are mostly following orders from back home, from nations that aren't democracies. They hold natural rights in contempt. Iran, China, Russia, countries that would never allow, much less invite an investigation into their record. Meanwhile, everybody else was making fun of these fools. China absolutely loved it. Okay, they've got a whole bunch of these globalist propaganda organs. One is called the Global Times. It's a CCP mouthpiece, and they actually attacked Republicans for not wanting to have this UN human rights record inspected by the United Nations. You should see this garbage that they have. They ran a piece, for example, by Wang Wenwen, saying that Republicans were bad for discouraging this UN probe. They said it's not that Republicans are unaware of the seriousness of the human rights abuses and racial discrimination in the U.S. They said they refuse to let justice come to see the light of day. Oh, isn't that cute? From a regime that is literally genociding an entire ethnic group, the Uyghur Muslims. they're going to tell us that America's racist. They ran another piece, same day, July 22nd, and they said the international community is highly concerned about systemic racism in the United States. And they go on to cite a communist operative, Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, lecturing America on how we need to carry out structural reform toward communism to address this systemic racism of America. Guys, when the Communist Chinese Party and the Biden administration agree America's evil and racist and should be investigated by the UN, that should cause you to wonder, why does the Biden regime have more in common with the most murderous dictatorship in human history when it comes to its view of America than it does with the American people or the actual America? Well, folks, it's because their agenda is to destroy the United States, to demonize America as a horrible, evil, racist, oppressive place. Remember the 1619 Project, the wackadoodle from the New York Times, who said America is systemically racist. She said the racism and the oppression is embedded in the DNA of America, folks. Their goal is to kill America because it's got evil DNA and replace it with something else. One more fun fact about Michelle Bachelet, and we have talked about her multiple times on this show. In addition to being the High Commissioner for Human Rights, she's also a proud member of the Socialist Party, which is actually the Communist Party, and she is also a key player in the Latin American Communist Terror Network known as the Sao Paulo Forum. In Portuguese, it's the Foro de Sao Paulo. In Spanish, it's El Foro de San Pablo. And this forum was founded by Fidel Castro, the mass-murdering, racist, genocidal lunatic that enslaved Cuba with help from our State Department and the New York Slimes. Also, another key founder was the Marxist narco-terror group, the FARC, the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia. So nice people that these UN human rights experts associate with, okay? The goal, guys, is to redefine human rights. In America, human rights are God-given rights. God gave us to them. Our job is to protect them. Well, they want to redefine that into government-granted privileges. Thanks for watching, folks. My name is Alex Newman. This is Behind the Deep State. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe, hit like, hit that little bell so that you'll be notified whenever we post new videos. And also, please make sure to share this video with your friends. Email is a great way to do it. Remember, there are powerful forces working to steal our freedom and destroy our country. We need to work together, expose those behind the deep state. Otherwise, you can kiss your liberties goodbye.